Hello and welcome to another video in which I explain and go over my technique. The one thing I wanted to say is that I am constantly changing and experimenting, so I don't have one technique per se. If there's anything to take away, is that you should experiment. You should try different things. Some folks ask me, well, what brush should I use? What watercolor brand should I use? It doesn't really matter. You should experiment and do enough of your own exercise where you find out what it is that you like. This is not watercolor paper. It is called Reeves BFK, R-I-V-E-S. It's a printmaking paper. By chance, I just made a drawing on it and decided to add watercolor, and it turned out really great. And I was like, maybe there's something to this. So I just want to share that with you, that you can get, this is the opposite of what I did with Sargent, which was very loose. This is very much like illustrative. I almost think of it as paint by numbers, because it's you know, each one has this little, it's almost like a puzzle, like you're putting a puzzle together. But I want to show you in the video how it's slowly, layer by layer, you go, and with patience you'll achieve this. But it's a different technique, and like I said, the whole point of this is to experiment and do what makes you happy. So let's go check out the video. Alright, thank you. So this is what I mean by experimenting. I'm using a tool that normally you only use for graphite, which kind of smudges around the graphite into the paper. A traditional watercolor teacher will tell you, don't use that. You want to keep it as clean as possible. But I figured I'm going to do it like a little grisaille, and it works. So experiment. Now look, that's a drawing. That's a photocopy of the drawing that I just taped. I wanted to show you that it's just as, you know, it's hard enough to paint, and I do love when I draw, when I'm not using, you know, when I'm not tracing. But in this case, I wanted to have a very accurate drawing. There's no shame in tracing. I know a lot of folks, it does help that you know how to draw, and if you begin by just tracing and not knowing how to draw, then it's going to be, you know, you're going to be able to tell. But make your life a little easier, and if you can trace it, trace it. I do feel that the right approach for the right project is what is needed, and in this case I just wanted to be very accurate, and I wanted to concentrate more on the application of the paint, and just to show you guys that things like this, like right now, it looks like a big old mess, and normally on a regular watercolor I'd start to freak out because there's just big masses, but you see that it doesn't bloom into the other part of the paper, where in a regular watercolor it would do that. This goes really slow and it seeps in because it's not watercolor paper, it is actually printmakers paper. So like inkers and people that do, you know, they run it through, and it's supposed to adhere or absorb ink. But you can find this at most art stores. I buy them in packs of, gosh, hundreds. So this is another technique that is different that I experimented and discovered that really works well. I have a colored paper, right? It's like this beigey color, and I'm now adding white, but I'm not adding white like gouache white. I'm adding, this is ink. This is actual white ink, and there is a little bit of a challenge with it sometimes, because if you put it too thick, you can't really paint all that well on top of it. But because it absorbs into the fibers, it works really well. So I encourage you guys to experiment and see if it works for you, for your technique. I wanted a nice, like, soft, even though it's very graphic, I wanted to have it a little bit soft. So The thing with this paper is that it absorbs the color, and you have to go over it a few times. So you'll see that it goes down quite dark. I'm going to go around the elbow here, and then later on we'll go and you'll see that it's gray. Here I'm using a synthetic brush. I used to use the sable brush, but I since learned that it's actually bad for the creatures, and the acrylic or synthetic works just as well. So when you start thinking about where the materials come from, you know, I felt bad for them, so I was like, well, if this works just as well, then why not? Also, the brush that I'm using is like, honestly, maybe like a $5 Japanese brush. So people ask me, what brushes do you use? I don't know, whatever works for you guys. So for me, this one works. Experiment, buy it. Art is an investment. You do have to spend some, not only materials, but time. And when people ask me, well, what's the best? What's the best? I can give you an idea of what works, but ultimately it's going to be up to what works for you. Now, this I want to show that I want to put a big old blotch of orange on her face. And it's quite striking there, but you'll see, normally I would start panicking under a regular watercolor, but I know how this watercolor behaves, this paper behaves rather. And here I'll be freaking out. I sped it up because we'd all be bored otherwise. But you see how it laid nice and evenly? And here's my second or third coat. And also, it's not black. It's kind of, they call it a gray. So that's on top. That's another reason why it's, when it dries, you can see the lower part, the one I'm going over now, it's gray, but I already went over it once. So I like that you can achieve by putting layers, you know, different levels of value, different hues. So yeah, this is what I was talking about, painting on top of the inked, the white ink. It's kind of settles on top. And that's it. And I'm signing it. And that's, thank you for joining me for another video. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you gained some knowledge, or makes you want to go out and experiment with different materials, and maybe send me an email and let me know something that worked for you that I haven't tried, and I'll make a video about it. All right. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.